One of the things that people get confused about is third axis leveling and what it is and honestly what to look for. This isn't a video on how to level your third axis, but this is a video on how to instantly recognize whether or not yours is correct or incorrect, because this is going to be so important whenever you're shooting uphill or downhill. This even includes if you're just shooting from a tree stand, shooting a downhill shot off a ridge or something like that. This small adjustment on a sight can definitely change your impact. So here's essentially what you're going to look for and what the rule of thumb is. So third axis adjustment is when you have an arrow on your bow like this. You can see that hopefully your arrow is running through the true center and it's got a good center shot adjustment. But then when you look at your scope housing, whether it's a 2-pin sight or a 5-pin sight, the level that's in this sight, and if you have a good sight, the level should be mounted squarely in a good sight. But if that is properly adjusted for your third axis, which is going to be an adjustment this direction on this spot hog, it's these two screws here. But all you're going to look for is my housing, and essentially the level that's in that housing, is it square to the arrow shaft? So you can see right there, if you just look down on your bow like this, and that scope is square to the arrow shaft and probably your stabilizer going out of the bow as well, then you know that at least you're close. You might not be perfect, but at least you're close. So let me just show you a quick example of if this wasn't set up right. So I'm just going to adjust this third axis just a little bit, and I'm going to show you what the difference is and what you can see here when you look at it. So even right there, okay, so go ahead and take a look right there. Now you can see when I'm holding this arrow in place, this side is now tipped down. So that's not perfectly square. That scope is running down this way and the arrow is running through. I'll magnify that a little bit more for you so you can see once again what that looks like. Now this is so important because if you've never done this and you're going to a total archery challenge for your first time, or if you're hunting for the first time, this is going to be so important to make sure it's right. So I went ahead and adjusted that a little bit more, and so now you can definitely see that that is off. And if you see this, whether it's that way or whether it's the opposite way, when you look down your bow and you look at that scope, if it is not square to that arrow shaft, perfectly square, then you know your third axis is wrong. And I'm going to show you what that means in regards to accuracy once you're actually shooting at a target. Now this is something that you can easily bump if you don't load your bow right in a bow case, if you have this thing in the back seat, if you've got your bow on horseback. Honestly, if you get to an event or a hunt of any kind, you go out on your range, you go out make a couple practice shots, and all of a sudden you notice that your impact is way off. One of the first things I look at is my sight square to my arrow shaft? Because if that's not square, then I know maybe this has been hit, it's been bumped, someone's ran into it, it's got wrecked on a horse, it's got wrecked on a four-wheeler, whatever it is. So now I'm going to mount this on this leveling block, and I'm just going to show you here what happens. Okay, so I'm going to level this quick just so that this front level is actually level for this representation. So what happens when this is not square is when the angle changes, you can see that that bubble shoots off to one side because, again, that level is not square to the arrow. So when it's not square and it gets raised or lowered, it'll go from one side. So right here you can see it's buried on that side. And what will happen is if I tip this downhill, so there's the downhill, now look, it's gone to the other side. So what that means is if you're paying attention to your bubble, then if you were shooting uphill and you got that bubble all the way to that side, well, now what you have to do is you have to lean your bow falsely. You have to cant your bow. And if you're canting your bow left or you're canting your bow right, it'll change where that arrow impacts. So the clear and easy way to know if your third axis is correct is your front level square to the arrow shaft. In this case, if you have something like that, it's not correct. Not correct, that right there is going to be at least in the ballpark. So this is something that you can look at quick, and even if you haven't watched the video on how to properly level your second and third axis, the second has to be leveled first, then the third axis. But if you at least look at that on your equipment, you're going to know right away whether or not yours is correct and whether or not you either readjust it yourself depending on the type of sight you have, or whether you go to your archery shop and just say, hey, my third axis is off. I would like that to be square, and hopefully if they have some type of a leveling device, they would be able to make sure that that level is perfectly in between your lines when you're flat, and then when it's raised up, and then when it is raised down in a fixed position, that level or that bubble should remain in the center of that level. So that's third axis, what to look for, and if you know it's wrong, go out and get it fixed. It'll save you.